you. Hi, everyone. So Code Your Own Arcade from Scratch is inspired by a camp that was created by Sensei Nathaniel Endick, and it is for ages 8+, and there's no experience required, but we do kind of dive right into the game development. So there is more of the, here's a piece of code, here's what it does, try it out and see, instead of the introductory what is coding and the slower scaffold and the pace. So that is going to be the difference between, I think, some of our Scratch badge materials versus this. The focus is, of course, to get them to create their own games and play it. So that's going to be the major difference. Next slide. Our main goals are going to be to teach students new coding knowledge. I love these emojis. We're going to explore some basic introductory game design concepts, and we're also going to collaborate with one another and iterate and play test each other's games. Next slide. So the structure of the camp includes a short mini exploded code game activity at the beginning of every day, and then they're going to code 2 main games the rest of the day. So a short mini game and then a bigger main game that they start from scratch. Start from like nothing. They create a new activity and they make a whole game. But I wanted to explain really quickly, if you are unfamiliar with exploded code activities, basically we provide them with code in the activity already, but laid out in pieces, almost like Legos, and there are comments in the event blocks, and then we actually encourage them to put the pieces together in a way that works in a game that's also on the slide. So this is the game, this is what the game's supposed to do. Try to make your game look like this one. So that one is more of a enclosed exploration area, but everyone's game at the end of the activity will look the same, and they'll also get a chance to see the answers. So that's just a way to pique their interest at how different code blocks fit together to do certain things, and also a chance to expose them to even more games that we normally wouldn't have time to have them build that many games, but now they're really building 15 games instead of just 10. Next slide. So on day 1, they're going to be introduced to the platform, and then they're going to be introduced to basic game design. So that's just, you have a hero sprite, you might have some collectibles or enemies, you might be able to move some things. And the exploded code activity is called Eat the Donut, and that's just an introductory Scratch activity where we're showing them how you can use key press to move a sprite around. And then they also code other games of the day, as you see on the GIF. GIF, I say GIF. It's a controversial topic on our team. And you're able to move your sprite and avoid enemies or try to get to your goal. Next slide. On day 2, they're taught many blocks. I just didn't want to overwhelm the slide, but the main focus is that the difference between day 1 and day 2 is now they actually start using broadcast to signal the transition between the first phase of the game, maybe it's the directions, maybe it's some sort of cool splash screen, to the second phase where they actually play, and then they use broadcast again to signal the end of the game. So that was like the main transition from day 1 to day 2. The exploded code activity is a clicker game, which I have been told is very popular with children. I have trouble understanding the point of it, but it seems to be fun, and people on the education team also like it. So there you go, clicker games. Activity 2 is a pop the balloon game where it's we introduce them to 2 players. So they're actually going to code a game in which, when they're done, they can play it with another person in a competitive way. And then activity, I think I said 2 earlier, I meant 1. Activity 2 of that day is a projectile game. And we decided to go in a more creative route instead of, the old school Space Invaders shooting at aliens. We're going with a food truck shooting delivery at customers. But again, this is our interpretation, and the code blocks that we're introducing, we're leaving it very open-ended, and ninjas can actually choose what they want their hero to be, what they want the projectile, what they want their enemies to be. All right, next slide. Day 3, they're going to be learning more about quote unquote physics. And again, this is not there's not a lot of time, so we're just presenting them with the information. Here's how you introduce movement in your game. So they're introduced to creating a breakout game where you slide the paddle and the ball moves around the screen. And they're also going to be creating a Flappy Bird game. And they learn about creating an illusion of movement through animation and costume changes. And the exploded code activity of the day is red light, green light. Next slide. On day 4, they're going to be introduced to 2 different kinds of maze games. So the first maze game that they create is more about multi-level. So once they've finished the goal on the first level, they get to a second harder level, move on to the third harder level. And again, we're kind of introducing the idea of designing your own maze backdrops and thinking about how you can make it more complex as the levels move up. And then the second maze is a complex maze game. Essentially, it's a version of Pac-Man where there's enemies that move around in predictable and non-predictable ways, and there are collectibles they want to get to, and there's other factors they can include in their game if they choose to. And the exploded code activity it's called Catch the Cats, and is actually a video sensing one. This is one of the many awesome activities that Sensei created that we were able to incorporate into the exploded code. And basically once they put the code blocks together, the game works. The scratch cats fall from the top, and as you move your hands, you make the cats go away, you earn points. And if the cats fall to the bottom of the screen, you lose a life, and so on. That one's kind of silly and fun. Again, I'm told that kids like this. Slide 5. So on day 5, they play and they put together a block stacker game. Essentially, it is a way it's not quite Tetris because the blocks do not clear. You're just trying to fit as many blocks as there can be on the screen before you run out of room. Once you touch the top, you lose. And then the snake game is the essential old school Nokia phone game. And they learn about using clones. They learn about putting a lot of the concepts they learned previously and into this final kind of project. But again, they always get to choose the color, the background, the collectible sprite that the snake is actually looking for. So there's always a level of personalization and customization in their projects. Last slide of the camp. So here are all the activities at once. These are the main project activities that they create from original activities, and they may look completely different. And again, on top of that are 5 exploded code that you saw earlier. Next slide. Oh, we don't have to play the timer. Sorry, I should have deleted it. That slide is from the day 5 presentation slide where ninjas actually get to choose their favorite project to present. So to go over some of the supporting documents that we are providing, this camp, similar to the storytelling and Scratch camp, uses Scratch. We have directions on how to create a teacher account, how to create a class, and studios. And we also are using Padlets again. Next slide. If you were with us last time, we discussed how Padlets are used in our camps, I think actually across many camps, as a way for students to drop in links to their projects, as a way for senseis to share out resources easily, because you can personalize the URL, so it's a little bit easier to type than others. And one of the things that we're using it for this time around, again, is one Padlet is used for sharing resources. So we have like links to the exploded code activities, links to sample activities of the activities they're creating. And then we also have a studio links Padlet, and that one is meant for centers themselves to actually take and remix and create their own version to share out, so that ninjas can easily click and find the studio links without having to type out the URL. And last time, one of the questions that we got about Padlet was the account. You can have a free Padlet account. You would just have to, you get up to 3 free Padlets per account. And you just have to delete them and create new ones for new camps. Or I think the paid account Grant mentioned was $8 a month. Yeah, it's pretty affordable. If you decide you want to use Padlets for the long term, and then keep those sites so that ninjas can go back to their old projects even after the camp has ended. Next slide. So here's one example of where this would look the same across all centers. This doesn't need to be duplicated. This is just a resource, and they can click on the links and remix the activities. Next slide. This is an example of the template Studio Links Padlet, which you would take and remix or create a copy of so that you can drop in your actual Studio Links after you create your Scratch teacher account. Next slide. Like the storytelling in Scratch, we also created Ninja Guides, and this is more of the planning documents versus I think other Ninja Guides sometimes are step-by-step directions. We've placed all the step-by-step directions on the slide deck so that it's on the screen presented to everybody, but the Ninja Guide helps them plan out, for example, what they want to write on the different backdrops and what kind of teaching them to decompose the problem ahead of time and having them write out what code goes in which event block, what they want that sprite to do, so that as they're coding their project, they can look back at their notes. Next slide. And similar to the other Scratch Camp, there's a lot of sharing and iteration, and there's also feedback time, play testing, and they get a chance to continue to improve their game. There's also was inspired by our badge activities way back when last year, where there are actually 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star challenges, so that if you have ninjas that are beginners without any experience, based on the tutorial and the guidance that we provide, they should be able to complete a 1-star game, a working game with the 1-star requirements. But if they are one of those ninjas that work really quickly and they want a challenge, we have 2 stars and 3 stars that kind of push them to do even more, make their game even more exciting, add more levels or more enemies. So we do provide that differentiation if that is required. But of course, if all ninjas are kind of brand new and they feel more comfortable staying in the 1-star, that's totally great. Next slide. We also introduced a little bit of game design basics, and this is just a hint to what they might be introduced to if they make it all the way through our belts. If you have ninjas in the brown, purple, and red belts, you might be familiar with all these words, but it's just a good way to kind of pique their interest if game design is something that they end up being interested in.